Hey, it's Cliff Allman. Welcome to the third video in the Paradiddle grid exercise I've been giving you. Up to this point, we've done some pretty detailed explanation as to how this breaks down and how you can start applying it to the drum set and use it in a number of different ways to improve your time and your inner clock, and there are a lot of benefits to get out of this. Now, if you've been practicing this up to this point, you're probably starting to see how this kind of pays off. Today I'm going to add one more thing to this, one more element to this exercise, and it's going to be an element of improvisation. But before we get to that, just to kind of recap what we've done up to this point, first we started with our hands on the snare drum, and I showed you how to orchestrate this paradiddle, not orchestrate, but break it down to our hands going up and down on the grid, starting with 4s and going to 8s and back down. Once we established that and we started accenting the first note of each paradiddle, and got comfortable with that, the next thing we did is we moved our right hand to the hi-hat, our left hand on the snare drum, and we turned it into a groove, adding a kick drum as well. Kind of not too complicated of a kick drum pattern, but our purpose was to get comfortable going up and down this grid in the standpoint, or from the standpoint of playing a groove. So we would kind of trick our ear into getting outside of the paradiddle itself. The third thing we did after that was switch the orchestration around, put our right hand on the snare drum, our left hand on the hi-hat, and every accent that we did, in other words, every first note of the paradiddle, we alternated. The right hand alternated between the snare drum and the floor tom, the left hand alternated between the hi-hat and the tambourine on this cymbal, and that was kind of like the last, I think that was the last orchestration that we did. After that, the next step that we took was to combine the two orchestrations going up and down the grid. So in other words, we started with the right hand hi-hat groove thing, we switched to the next orchestration and just alternated, starting with 4, alternating 5, 6, 7, 8, and back down in 2s. Okay? So that leaves us to where we are now, basically. Today what we're going to do is essentially add one more element to this. And just to keep things simple, we're going to put a definition on each one of these orchestrations. We'll kind of do it in the sense of a form. So, in other words, what we'll do is the first groove thing that we did, the right hand on the hi-hat, left hand on the snare drum groove concept, we'll call that variation A. Okay? The second thing that we did, the right hand on the snare drum, left hand on the hi-hat, going back and forth, call that variation B, or orchestration B. Now the third thing that we're going to do today that we didn't do before was add this sort of improvisational element to this. Many of you who saw the free videos that I did like a year or so ago, the first free video that we sent out was an orchestration thing over a similar grid, except we just improvised. Whatever grid we landed on, we played anything that came to our mind, but we did it over that grid. So if we landed on a 6, we improvised in a 6. If we landed on a 7 or an 8, same thing, right? We weren't thinking about sticking. So this set of exercises, we have been thinking strictly about keeping the paradiddle sticking up to this point. Now we're going to get away from that in this C variation I'm going to give you today. We're going to play the first A and B variation, but then we're going to add a C variation of just playing over the grid, whatever grid we land on. We'll just improvise over it, and then we'll start over with the A variation. So in other words, when we start off with the 4, we're playing this paradiddle, starting with the 4, that would be A. The 5 will end up being B. The 6 will end up being C. So we'll be just improvising. Once we're done with C, we go right back to A. So in this case, when we get to 7, we'll be back on the right hand leading, playing the paradiddle groove, and then we'll go to 8 playing B, the B orchestration, and then when we come back down, we'll be on the 7, and we'll be improvising in 7. So this is in 3s now. So A, B, C will go 4, 5, 6. A, B, C again will go 7, 8, back to 7. ABC after that will be 6, 5, 4. So in other words, when you get out of this, you'll be improvising over the final 4. Okay? Now, of course, mathematically, 3 into 8, it doesn't add up. but you can continue this exercise. So I know this sounds really complicated, but if you've watched the videos up to this point, it should make sense. If you haven't seen those videos, make sure you go to my site, cliffallmanlessons.com, enter an email address, and you'll get them sent to you so everything will be explained. You won't be guessing what we're doing, all right? So as complicated as that sounds, let's check out an example, and I'll be back with you in a minute. So that was just one time through. You can obviously cycle it and just keep going back until you end up where you started. I think it'll take 2 or 3 times. You also don't have to do the forms in that order. You can start with the improv, you can start with the orchestration. You can add orchestrations if you want. The theory of this is you're trying to teach yourself to kind of get away from hearing the paradiddle the same way. You want to separate your hands from your ear. Kind of an ongoing theory that I push in teaching. I try to get people to learn things from what's going through their head, like their melodies in their head or references in their head, rather than learning things from muscle memory. This is kind of a trick. It's sort of like unlearning the whole paradiddle thing, because we always learn rudiments and then apply them to the kit. If you learn to apply them in strange ways and trick your ear, you can separate yourself and develop your time and just end up down a whole different road. I know for those of you who didn't see the previous videos on this this exercise, it probably just sounds like it doesn't make any sense, but there's a theory to it. If you want to see those, just go to my site. You can get on the list there and get the other videos in this series for free. That being said, there's one more way that you can do this, which is a little bit hairier. And it's basically, instead of playing in 4-bar phrases and going up and down the grid, we play in 2-bar phrases. So let me reiterate something that I said in the other videos in case you haven't seen those yet. The goal of this exercise is not to bury the click, or, well, I shouldn't say it's not to bury the click. As drummers, we always want to bury the click and be as tight with it as we can, or have the ability to play behind it or ahead of it, all that. But this exercise isn't supposed to be metrically perfect. You're not supposed to line everything up perfectly. You can work toward that if you like, but that's kind of not the goal. The goal is to be able to get up and down through the grids, doing whatever you want. We started with this a year ago with the free soloing stuff and just improvising. Now we're working on a sticking, and we're mixing the two together. So it kind of frees you up with the clock thing and your time and all that. And you know, occasionally I put exercises like this out there, and they're really complicated. And sometimes I'll hear from people like, you know, why would I practice something this challenging or difficult, or, you know, where am I going to use this, you know? And I liken that to sort of the principle of learning anything that you may not necessarily use. You're just trying to improve things, and you're trying to give yourself as many options as possible of how to think about stuff. You may not necessarily be on a rock gig and play this weird paradiddle exercise, and you know, you'll get fired, I guarantee you. But if you at least can internalize this and get the benefits of this exercise, it'll help you in a number of different situations. But it's hard to explain that until you actually feel it, and you feel what it can do for you once you get it together. And I know it's frustrating, and it was frustrating for me. I'm still kind of coming up with different variations of it, and I work on it. But I think if you work on it and get it internalized, you'll see what I mean, because it's really a great exercise. All right, thanks for watching. See you next time.